Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Unraveling Politics. This is a show where I explain the news and politics of the week, and I provide my analysis in a way that everyone can understand. So, of course, as I said at the beginning of last week, this was also a hefty week in politics. We got a lot of it, and we have some major news from the White House. Joe Biden has said in a letter, "My fellow Americans, over the last 3.5 years, we've made a great progress as a nation. Today, the American economy has the strongest economy in the world. We made historic investments in rebuilding our nation, in lowering prescription drug costs for seniors, and in expanding affordable health care to a record number of Americans. We provided critically needed care to 1 million veterans exposed to toxic substances, passed the first gun safety law in 30 years, appointed the first African-American woman to the Supreme Court, and passed the most significant climate legislation in the history of the world. America has never been positioned to lead than where we are today. I know none of this could have been done without you, the American people. Together we overcame a once-in-a-century pandemic and the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. We protected and preserved our democracy, and we've revitalized and strengthened our alliances around the world. It has been the greatest honor of my life to serve as your president, and while it has been my intention to seek re-election, I believe it is in the best interest of my party and for the country for me to stand down and focus solely on fulfilling my duties as president for the remainder of the term. I will speak to the nation later this week in more detail about my decision. For now, let me express my greatest gratitude to all those who have worked so hard to see me reelected. I want to thank Vice President Harris for being an extraordinary partner in all this work, and let me express my heartfelt appreciation to the American people for the faith and trust you have placed in me. I believe today what I have always had: there's nothing America can't do when we do it together. We just have to remember we are the United States of America." Of course, the race has now been blown wide open. We have no idea what's going to happen at this point. There's not much even I can predict. I've had to re-record this episode. There's some parts I'm going to keep. But this is clearly a major decision. He is the first president to decline to seek re-election since Lyndon Johnson in 1968. And that does remind me of Lyndon Johnson. He said it was in the best interest of his party. Lyndon Johnson said, if I remember, he will not seek, nor will he accept his party's nomination for another term as president. So, the nation, he'll speak to the nation later this week. I'll probably have to make a special episode to update you on that as time goes on. If not, we'll have to, I assume he will, so he will speak. While he did not endorse Kamala Harris in that letter, he did endorse her on Twitter. And this was what he said. He said, "My fellow Democrats, I've decided not to accept the nomination and focus all my energies on my duties as president for the remainder of my term. My very first decision as party nominee in 2020 was to pick Kamala Harris as my vice president, and it's the best decision I've made. Today, I want to offer my full support and endorsement for Kamala to be the nominee of our party this year. Democrats, it's time to come together and beat Trump. Let's do this." And then posted a picture of the two of them together. So, I think that she has a better shot than Biden does, but it's still not that great because she is kind of tainted with a lot of his legacy. So, we'll have to wait and see. I'll have to do an episode on the polling as time goes on. And somebody said to me, and he was absolutely right, the longer he stays in, the more the speculation continues to build. Trump picked J.D. Vance, senator from Ohio, to be his running mate, and he has a very, very good chance to be the next vice president. So it was also the RNC was this week. I didn't watch too much. I did listen to J.D. Vance's speech. I didn't listen to Trump's speech because I already listened to the other two. Didn't think there was a need to listen to what would probably be the same speech all over again. I don't know if it actually was. Of course, there were some differences, but I wanted to hear from Vance the most. So, the goal for picking J.D. Vance, here are the benefits. The objective was to try to pick up votes in Ohio, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Those are the big swing states. Really, those are the states that are going to make or break the Trump campaign. J.D. Vance has a working-class upbringing. As I'm sure you've heard in the media, he wrote Hillbilly Elegy in 2016 about growing up in rural southern Ohio. It's a very inspiring story. Definitely that American, American story that people love to hear. And that was definitely that was one of the plus factors of picking him. I thought it was going to be Rubio. I really didn't think it would be Vance. And the reason why is Vance he doesn't come from a presidential battleground. Ohio hasn't been won by a Democrat in 12 years, and it probably won't be won by one this time. And two, he doesn't have enough experience to be president. I don't care what anybody says, writing a book and being in the Senate for 2 years is not enough experience to be president. Now, you might say, oh, he's running for vice president. He's not running for president. Yes, that is true, but when you're running for vice president, you also basically running to be the backup president. You could be president at any time. And considering that Trump is not exactly not exactly a spring chicken, Trump should have picked somebody who knows that could be president at any moment. So he could pick up some votes in PA and Michigan. We'll have to see. Yet at the same time, Vance might have been a poor choice because his appeal is to a lot of working class people that were probably already going to vote for Trump. One of my friends I would call him an expert in demographics. I was talking to him earlier this week, and I hope to have him on the show later in the year. He was saying that in terms of demographics, you got people. First of all, demographics include race, includes gender, includes age, all that stuff. But we're going to focus on region. There's rural, urban, and suburban voters. Rural voters tend to vote for Republicans. They've swung from Democrats to Republicans in the last few decades. Then you have urban. Those have been with Democrats for a long time. They used to be Republican, but it's been a lot more urban. It's been Democrats. Then you have suburban, which is swept back and forth. It used to be, in recent years, Republicans are rural, urban voters are Democrat, and it was who won the suburbs. George W. Bush did a very good job in the suburbs. Obama did a good job in the suburbs. In 2016, Trump did an okay job in the suburbs. In 2020, Biden did a good job. So really where Trump needs to pick up votes is in the suburbs. In 2020, he made some gains in the cities. It was very small. Like in Philadelphia, he picked up like 2% of the vote, which is a decent amount of votes, but that's not a lot. He had huge losses in the suburbs, and that's what cost him a lot of the states like Pennsylvania and Georgia. My guess is that those votes are not going to come back. And then he made some small gains in rural areas, but the problem is those areas already vote 70, 60, 70, 80%. Those are pretty tapped out. There's not that much left to pull. So really, Trump needed a running mate that would pick up votes in the suburbs, especially like women who really voted for him against Hillary in 2016, but went back to Biden. So I don't see Vance really doing that. Is that a big deal? Probably not, but that's something I would have liked to see, at least on the Trump side. Vance's speech, which I found a good excerpt I'm going to play for you right now, sounded very populist. He's a lot like Trump. I would have liked to see somebody who was more moderate, just because that would kind of counteract Trump. But instead, Trump picked somebody who was very much like his protege. And here's a clip of what from his RNC speech that I thought was really important.
When I was in the 4th grade, a career politician by the name of Joe Biden supported NAFTA, a bad trade deal that sent countless good jobs to Mexico. When I was a sophomore in high school, that same career politician named Joe Biden gave China a sweetheart trade deal that destroyed even more good American middle-class manufacturing jobs. When I was a senior in high school, that same Joe Biden supported the disastrous invasion of Iraq, and at each step of the way, in small towns like mine in Ohio, or next door in Pennsylvania or Michigan, in states all across our country, jobs were sent overseas and our children were sent to war. And I agree. And somehow, a real estate developer from New York City by the name of Donald J. Trump was right on all of these issues while Biden was wrong. President Trump knew even then that we needed leaders who would put America first.
As you can hear, J.D. Vance is much, much younger than Joe Biden, and that is exactly the kind of energy I think the country needs. I'm not saying that Vance was the right person. I don't really think he was. But you can see it was pretty genius of him that he was able to connect the destruction that Joe Biden has caused, that he believes in his life, to the national scene. He was able to connect that. So I also wanted to quickly mention that Nikki Haley has endorsed Trump, and she even spoke at the convention when she previously called him unfit. And speaking of Trump, Judge Eileen Cannon has struck down the classified documents case. She said, in the end, it seems the executive's growing comfort in appointing regulatory special counselors in more re-centralization has followed an ad hoc pattern met with little scrutiny. And the Attorney General must create a structure. That's what she was saying. This judge was appointed by Trump. It is going to be the prosecutor is considering refiling charges, and of course that is going to delay the case beyond the election. There's now no doubt about that. So for now, Trump only has to worry about the Georgia case, and I'm not sure the implement as well as January 6th, and of course the appeal for the hush money case is going through. So that's why we're going to have to wait and see. That was probably one of the strongest cases against Trump, but it was just thrown out. Of course, that I would say that's a little bit suspicious, and I would have liked to have seen that go to trial. Anyway, also I want to throw this in there. Bob Menendez was convicted on all counts of bribery. I talked about this on the show a couple months ago. He was accused of being a foreign agent. He was on the Senate, also on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He did step aside from that. He is likely facing decades in prison. The maximum would be 222 years. Imagine facing literally centuries in prison. That is what he's facing. So he is not stepping down from the Senate. He is running for re-election as an independent. He's up this year. His trial date, or his sentence dating, is in October, right before the November election. So the Democrats they have their own nominee, somebody else, Andy Kim, pretty good congressman. I don't live in New Jersey, but I've seen his ads on TV for some reason. He is probably going to win, of course, because New Jersey is a pretty safe state, unless Menendez is able to pull off votes from Andy Kim and split it two ways and then a Republican goes in. But there's really nothing appealing about Menendez. I don't see why anyone would be like, oh, I want to vote for Bob Menendez. So I would expect this to be the end. He could face expulsion from the Senate. I'm surprised it hasn't happened already. 12 Democrats have come out against him. There's 49 Republicans. That's 61 out of the required 67 to expel. So he's getting pretty close, and hopefully he does step down. And then in that case, the governor of New Jersey, Phil Murphy, would have to appoint an interim senator to fill a vacancy. And of course that would be a Democrat, because Phil Murphy is a Democrat. Anyway, that's all I have to say. This was a truly momentous episode, and I've had to re-record this 3 times as news came out. Hopefully things cool down and nothing crazy happens. Otherwise, I will update you later in the week. So have a great week. Stay tuned on the news if you can, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.